We're at the government facility in Millbrook that is at the end of County House Road. And you can see there's a driveway and a concrete pad. When I first started coming here, almost a decade ago, what stood here was a two and a half story white frame, so wood building, that was the house that the caretaker of the Dutchess County Poorhouse and lunatic asylum, he and his family lived here. It was recently demolished. It was beyond repair, and therefore it was left to fall down as much as it could on its own, and then the rest was taken away. So this driveway and concrete pad is the haunting remnants of that building, and you can follow the concrete that would bring you to some other small outbuildings that are still remaining from the complex that was here. So if you look at the more modern building that was built, I believe, in the 1970s, it serves a similar function today. It is for mental health and health-related county functions. But if you could kind of start seeing in the trees back there, its predecessor has a few buildings that still remain. We're at the door of the Eastern Dutchess Government Center, which next to it are these old stairs that lead up to the last official brick building of the Dutchess County Poorhouse and Lunatic Asylum. Right at the fence in between the trees and shrubbery, you can see the main front entrance, the windows, the brick architecture, and the broken window up at the top. The placement and the sufficiency of windows and therefore fresh air was a major issue of concern when this was the Poorhouse and Lunatic Asylum. There are historical archival accounts of people not receiving enough fresh air and sunshine to aid in their recovery from the conditions that ailed them. We're on the side of the building now, and what you can see here is very, very many windows. Some of these were added on after that initial controversy. The center is the stairwell going up, and these windows are relatively recent. They're not as old as the building. You could tell by the sashes and how many panels they are if you do any historical architectural assessment. But as part of the need for fresh air and sunlight, which was believed to cure people who were sick and even insane, there's also the remnants of a sun porch. We'll go around the back and take a closer look. Here you can see the lower parts of the sun porch have glass in the windows, and the upper part looks like it was intended to be a screened-in upper open air porch deck patio. You see how large it is and how focused it is on trying to ensure that inmates had enough sun and sunshine. You can see in the window there's a sun catcher decoration still hanging, and it says "Welcome" on it. This is all a wood frame addition onto the brick building, and we could probably date exactly when that was added, and it probably relates to that controversy of not having enough fresh air. On the other side, that window that's broken, part of the curtain is still hanging out, and you can see the curtains were decorative, not necessarily institutional. That goes along with that little welcome sign. You could also see another brick addition, and the window there, you might be able to make it out through this chain link fence, but the window there is metal on the inside. So people were prevented from breaking the window, either with the concern that somebody would try to break in or that somebody would try to break out. This side of the building, you can see there was a front porch that's kind of been taken down just to the brick so that the wood entryway is gone. And you see this big open field. When I came here again first time about a decade ago, there was another brick building here. So there is an archaeological site through all of this grass that would help us to understand the relationship between these two buildings and what life was like for inmates of both the poorhouse and the asylum. Just to the other side where those pipes are, there was also until very recently a garage and work shed building that was also recently taken down. Like most county poorhouses of the late 1800s and early 1900s, this poorhouse had a working farm as part of it. So it had all of the elements of not only caring for the patients, but also a working farm that would provide food and labor and help train people in jobs who were here as part of the poorhouse, not as the lunatic asylum. We're on the back side of the main poorhouse building, and there was a building in that field, and you could see that there's even some haunting little remnants of the architecture that lined the boundaries of buildings and roadways, and some ruts left in the road from all the years of people working here. This is where that garage was. Turning this way, you could just start to make out in the trees there some remnants of some farm buildings. Closer view, the building in the front, not the white house in the back that's across the street, but the brown wood is the remnants of, it's either this was part of the pig or the cow area, if I remember correctly from the original maps. The only aspect of the Dutchess County Poorhouse and Lunatic Asylum that is currently being interpreted and presented to the public is at the end of this quite long road that vehicles are not allowed except for maintenance or special occasions. So we're going to go up to the Briar Hill Cemetery, where a couple hundred of the people who lived and died at this facility are buried, but also people who were unable to afford burials through their family, and people who were never identified in death. There are some people here who were just bodies found on the railroad tracks and bodies found in the Hudson River. We've made the hike that's just over a quarter of a mile up the road to what will be the interpretive kiosk that will have a map of the cemetery and what will be a memorial plaque to the people who are buried here. This stone, this kiosk, this fence, and the fact that you could actually get into the cemetery, that it's no longer woods and brambles, is all very new, and thanks to the Dutchess County Director of Public Works, who took on this project to make this a place of memory instead of a place of forgetting. The rough thing here is that many of the graves are unmarked, and those that are marked, the markers are very small circles, sometimes set very close to the ground. So right now I am walking on some of the most recent people to have been buried here in the late 1920s and early 1930s. You might be able to see that I'm coming upon a marker, and I'm going to get really close to it so you can see just how small it is. There's my foot for comparison. So do you see there's another one right there? And then another one that is broken to bits. So the Vassar students and I and a previous Vassar professor worked to help document where all the graves are that we know of, both with ground penetrating radar and with traditional survey. And at one point we had them all marked with flags and with flagging tape so that you could stand here and see where all the graves are. But over time those flags and flagging tape decompose, and long grass can hide many a grave. You're just going to walk down a row here a bit. You can see this marker, for example, has lost its number completely. So using the data that we have compiled as archaeologists and geologists, we can help to restore these markers at any point in time because we know their latitude and longitude coordinates as to where they are. We've also been working with local historian whose name is Ginny, and she has compiled some of the stories of some of the people who were at the Poorhouse and that may or may not be buried here, and we've created a database so that the ones that we know who they are, you could click on our map database that is available online and learn about them. Further in from where I am now, the numbers on the markers start going down. The ones in the 700 numbers are the ones from the early 1900s. But going back further, we get to some of the older ones, and they are of lower numbers. They are to my left, they're into the 400s, and to my right, they're into the zeros. There's a number 1 somewhere. And you can see that they are more densely packed, and some of them stand up more, so they're easier to see. So here is a row right here that you could see going off into the distance. Unfortunately, these are round markers, so when they come out of the ground, sometimes because of the trees pushing them up with their roots, they tend to roll away from where they originally were intended. So some of these we actually know from our work are not in the right spot because they are, well-meaning people have replaced them where they thought they'd go, but that doesn't fit with what we have with our documentation. So here we have grave number 3. We started way out there with grave numbers in the 700s and 740s. So we have reason to believe there's about 1,000 people buried here on this landscape. Only one of those people has a grave marker. You see that there are no circular markers in the area I am right now. We believe using ground penetrating radar that there are people right here. It's just that their markers were of a different kind maybe, and therefore decomposed, or they were lost by rolling down the hill with trees. You can see there are some markers on either side of me, but not where I am in the center, yet we believe there are people buried here. So we're walking back to the only individual who has a grave marker in this cemetery that actually gives this person their identity back. And we believe this is because after he died, a while after he died, a sister found out that he was buried here with just one of those round markers, and she paid to have his marker replaced with a more traditional gravestone. So there you could see it in the distance. Interestingly, there doesn't seem to be any other markers around him. So if they didn't move him, he surely has neighbors that are currently unmarked. This is the only marked grave at the Duchess Poorhouse Cemetery. I'm still in the cemetery. This is an example of the problem that we're having. You see this marker has come completely out of its spot and is now going to roll down the hill. We want to take note that this is marker 516, and therefore we could check our database to figure out where it goes and work to get it back in the proper place. Before we leave, I wanted to give you one last close-up look through the fence of this other side of the asylum building, and you could possibly make out that at the top window there's a turkey vulture nesting. And the way that the curtains are hanging in the window just to the left on the second floor of the front door, which is open, almost looks like there's somebody in there looking out.